I read a news story the other day that made me scratch my head and suddenly realize that everything we've been told up to date is wrong.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about how things have dramatically changed during the past several months. As I've told you before, if you're a regular listener to the program, I came out of retirement back in end of February to work for a rather large county in their COVID-19 response. I have a background in emergency management, and a good friend of mine needed some help, and we worked well together in planning and implementing a program to mitigate the problem. And so I was immediately engulfed in all kinds of information I can still get access to each and every day, to really look at the dashboards, not what the news media wants to tell you, but I can dig deeper into the statistics and the information out there in many states. And when I watch the narrative on TV, it doesn't always match the data we're being given and the actual numbers we're really seeing on the ground. There has been, in my opinion, and you may want to disagree with me, we're going to talk about this and the numbers and everything else, and I'm going to try to give you a little bit of understanding from our perspective when you work in the business of emergency management, and if you're willing to divorce yourself from the politics, well, honestly, that's how it should be. I really believe an announcement that came out on a couple of days ago from the CDC, and I'm looking at a report from NBC News, and they're talking about something that just goes against everything, every bit of training, every video. 45 years of studies have just been tossed away. I mean, thrown out the door, and there's evidence to show that what they're saying is not really even, it's just a guess. But it's being put out there like it's real. All of a sudden, the CDC sent out a tweet. That's a good way to let the world know, urging Americans to wear face coverings in public. When they first advised that, they were telling us it protected others, which is, possibly true. Now they're saying there's growing evidence a mask can give you protection for wearing it. Yet, I was looking at videos and studies and webinars from the CDC and various state departments of health saying that was a bunch of baloney, that the mask would protect the wearer. And so it became this, well, we wear a face covering to protect others. My mask protects you, and your mask protects me. How many times have we heard that? Being shamed into wearing a mask because if God forbid I would have COVID, I'm going to be spreading it like a super spreader without a mask. Now, out of nowhere, we're being told that, hey, a face covering can protect you, yet it was beaten into our heads from 45 years of blind studies, real studies, not just, it appears to be, or maybe it does. All of a sudden, politics now dictate public health. And this angers me, because I worked in this and I saw the politics play out. And I saw the stupidity and the things being done in the name of politics and control. I'm going to say something, and you may not want to believe it, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. The CDC is a political organization more than it is, at times, a disease control organization, just like the WHO. People got really upset, and you heard a lot of news stories about a year ago and then in the beginning of the pandemic, how the current administration had cut the budget of the CDC, and people are going, how can you do that? Real easy. The budget was cut on the parts of the CDC that only deal in politics. Let me make that very clear. The budget that was cut at the CDC had to do with departments that had nothing to do with health, but public policy and politics. Since when does an organization like the Center for Disease Control it needs to be the most nonpartisan, non-political group in the world. People there should be apolitical. They shouldn't really care. They should be driven by the concerns of health care. But it's been increasingly obvious in my lifetime, and I go back to a time in the 70s as a young news reporter in Atlanta covering stories out of the CDC. And back then, they were just dedicated to disease control. They came about in the 1950s during various, problems with polio and other diseases as a way to help the public. But as any government bureaucracy does, over time it kept growing and getting bigger and fatter, dependent upon government money. And in time, like any government organization, it builds a defense mechanism to maintain its funding. The budgets, I learned this in government. The budgets of any department in any government, I don't care if it's federal, state, or even local, they do their best to protect their budgets. They're not going to go through a budget cut. They don't want to lose any money, even when the economy is awful. I saw that play out at the county level a little over 10 years ago, where obviously tax revenues are down, so the budget needs to be cut. But everybody said, well, you can cut all you want, just not my department, not my division. We're too important. You can't cut us. You can't make my people suffer with less. You can't cut anything in our department. If anything, we need more money. Even during difficult times back around, 2008, 2009, 2010, you had school boards still wanting to build multi-million-dollar buildings, and they wanted to raise taxes at a time when a lot of people were unemployed. They didn't care because, hey, we are protected, and we're never going to lose our job, and we want new buildings, so you have to cough it up and pay for it. And this is the problem, in my opinion, with the CDC. And statements, I'm thinking, I went through all these webinars. I was told to read all this material to understand the good and the bad of wearing any kind of a face covering in public. We were told that these masks will give some protection against spreading the virus to somebody else. But we were also told never depend on that thing to protect you. And they have the data and they have the studies done in hospitals and all over the world for 45 years to prove that. And to make people aware, don't rely on the mask to protect you. And now suddenly, it magically overnight, in the middle of a election recount, hey, maybe we all need to wear a mask. And we hear this term, a mask mandate, coming down the pike. I am convinced, once again, let me tell you about the county that I worked with. In the state that I was working for as a contract employee in this large county, matter of fact, a rather blue county, but everybody in the emergency management division was not necessarily blue. My job was to help facilitate a way to keep this disease from spreading. We had been told to expect thousands of people dead in this large county by the time the month of May or June rolled around. And so we were doing everything from looking for refrigerated trucks to be temporary morgues. We were looking for hospital overflow places. We had the hospital, like every other hospital, literally shutting down parts of the hospital where all elective surgeries and things were to stop. We were ready for this big onslaught of thousands of people getting ill and many, like I say, even thousands dying in this county. We were prepared. One of the first things we did, though, which was not done in New York and a lot of other places, and not even in the state that we lived in, we made the decision early on to secure the nursing homes and other people of risk that we were aware. I can honestly tell you, beyond the shadow of a doubt, this large county with a pretty good-sized city, we had the lowest death rate per 100,000 of any other place in the entire state, and it rivals most other counties in the United States. We did our job, and that's how it probably should have been done everywhere. But places where politics got involved became a problem. There is no such thing. We learned this too early on. This had nothing to do with any politics. This came strictly from medical people that had no dog in a political fight. That a one-size-fits-all solution will never work, not in this country. The population density in New York City is vastly different than the population density in rural South Carolina. And the way you deal with a pandemic in a population density area like New York City or even Long Island is going to be different than how you deal with it in a South Dakota or a Utah. That's just common sense. So when I have politicians saying the one size fits all, everybody wear a face covering, and now the face covering is going to protect you. Dr. Anthony Fauci, who I call Dr. Fraud, and I get that name from other people that have worked with the man for over 15, 16 years. So he already had a bad reputation among many of his peers. He said it's increasingly clear that the benefit of wearing masks is a two-way street. And this is coming from the same man who once said,
people should not be walking around with masks. You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this. Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet. But it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their face.
And can you get some schmutz sort of staying inside there?
Of course. But when you think masks, you should think of healthcare providers needing them and people who are ill.
So, Dr. Fauci, what changed since you made those statements back in April? I mean, what really has changed since that time? When you told the world, by the way, try to find that video on YouTube. It's getting even more difficult as YouTube is scrubbing things. I mean, look at it this way. The tech tyrants of this world are trying to be the ministry of truth, as in George Orwell's 1984. They feel obligated to tell you what to think and to censor what they think you should be allowed to see or hear. So what made the change? I can tell you, politics. It is absolutely political. You now have a person who may very well end up being the president of the United States in Joe Biden. And what's he saying? In order to get rid of the virus, we're going to need universal mask wearing. I mean, this is what he wants us to do. If we all just put on a mask and everybody wears one, the virus will just magically go away. I'm still upset with Pfizer Corporation, and I got several things that I'm upset about there. It's all political. If you do some of the studies that I have gone into, which is the stuff people in emergency management get to see, what are the percentage of people that end up in the hospital or get sick with the coronavirus? What percentage of those people are wearing a mask? About 85%. The other 15% that get it were not wearing a mask. Now, those are just true numbers. But you're going to say, Bob, in a lot of places, a lot of places have mandatory mask wearing, and a lot of people don't. It really is not as effective as we've been led to believe. And let's think about this. How many of you that have to wear one wherever you live keep reusing that same paper mask you keep somewhere in the glove box of your car or in your pocket or above your visor? How many days have you been using that mask? How many weeks have you been using that mask? And that little thing you sewed together that looks so cute, when's the last time you washed it? The whole masking issue is a serious issue, and it's going to cause other problems. We're already seeing that. If you are sick, of course wear one, because you are the one that could spread, and it helps to not eliminate, but to lower the risk. To lower the risk of getting this virus. 45 years of research on cloth and paper and all the kind of mask you could possibly use. The virus is so tiny that paper and cloth mask that you're wearing in Walmart or the grocery store or wherever you're supposed to wear one, it's not providing you any real protection at all. That's a false science. Now, if we were wearing a true N95 that was properly fitted to your face and fully sealed, it might provide some protection, even though the air openings are still vastly larger than the virus. But how many of you are going to wear $200 and $300 face masks and dispose of them on a daily basis or get them recleaned or sterilized? Not many. I see people, you can tell they've been wearing that face mask for a while. A paper face mask. You get 2 of them for $1 something at Walmart. And people spend their $1, and now they have a face mask, and they wear it over and over and over again. And as you heard Dr. Fauci himself talking about, people touch their mask, they fiddle with the mask. It is, I'm sorry, but I'm really having to come down hard on this because I'm watching the goalpost being picked up in the middle of the night and moved for political purposes over and over and over again, and I'm getting tired of it. Dr. Fauci, who I call Dr. Fraud, because he's nothing more these days, he doesn't treat patients anymore. Dr. Fauci worries more about a budget because he's an administrator. Remember, Dr. Fauci is the guy that told us back in the 1980s that he would give us a vaccine for the AIDS-causing virus, HIV. Hadn't happened yet. Millions of dollars go through his department. And now he was the guy that was telling us all the things we need to do, to lock down, to do this, do that, do the other. And pretty much everything he's ever told us has changed. In other words, what he told us in March changed by May. What he says in May changes by July. What he said in July changed in September. And now what he said in September is changing again here in November. I've gotten to the point that I don't believe the man anymore because he's more driven by politics than a pandemic. I'm serious. I don't trust the man. I absolutely do not trust the man. There's a political agenda going on there. And for the CDC to suddenly out of nowhere just throw into the trash bin 45 plus years of study after study after study done all over the world. Material that at one time I could see from the CDC website just vanishes, just disappears. I mean, with nothing to back it up, but, well, it appears. Well, that's all that NBC needed to hear, the Nothing But Crap Network. That's all they needed to hear. So now, the headline now is two-way street. CDC report says masks protect wearers and everybody else. And then it continues, adopting universal masking policies can help avert future lockdowns. I doubt it. I thoroughly doubt it. I can give you an idea of how all this is going to play out, and I've been saying this, since probably back in May. if you go back to the early days of this pandemic, okay, let's go back to the early days of this pandemic. There was a lot we didn't know, a lot of bad assumptions made by the CDC, and then the WHO and China saying it was not even contagious. And it's funny how China locked down. You know what Dr. Fauci said about lockdowns when you go back? He was talking about the draconian lockdowns done in China, and he said that could never happen here, and now it is. Did they really work? The one thing the news media never wants to discuss is the mistakes that have been made by the CDC or the WHO. They try to point to just the president, try to blame him for everything. And it's easy when you're an armchair quarterback the day after the game to say what should have been done. Hindsight is generally 20/20. We knew early on, those of us in emergency management at the street level, dealing directly with the hospitals and dealing directly with EMS services, dealing with reports coming out of doctors' offices and those that died of COVID or may have died of COVID. By the way, in the county that I served, we had a very non-political health director, an excellent doctor, could have worked anywhere but chose to live in that part of the world for family reasons. Disputed several of the so-called COVID deaths, and 25 to 30% of the deaths marked in that county were removed because they really weren't. They couldn't have been. But the hospital was hoping they could be counted that way for financial purposes. Remember, you sometimes forget, hospitals were told to close their doors for an extended period of time. I mean, we saw that. I mean, they only could deal with the most emergencies of emergencies, so they wouldn't be overwhelmed when the coronavirus came roaring through town. One hospital I know only remained at 16% capacity during the entire period of time, and over time started laying off about a half to two-thirds of their staff. There was nobody in the hospital. The auxiliary hospital we set up in the county I worked in never was used. Think of the ships sent to New York's harbor. Hospital ships. They really went unused. Mobile hospitals set up in Central Park. Virtually unused. The hospitals never were overwhelmed as we were told they were going to be. And Governor Cuomo, remember Governor Cuomo? There's a piece of work. There's a guy that would rather climb a tree to tell a lie than stand on the ground and tell you the truth. It's been his political, way of doing things for the 3 terms he's been in office, and the guy wants to go for 4 terms in New York. God help New York. The man is dangerous. The man, just to spite Trump, does things opposite of what they've been suggested to do. And that's why he had such a high number of people dying. And he tries to point the finger of blame to everybody but himself. He is the mass murderer. He knew, pardon my French, damn well you don't put sick people back in a nursing home. But he did it to spite the government. And he wants you to respect him. And he wants to blame everybody but himself. And he wonders why people are leaving New York State. I'm trying to figure how many Congress people they're going to lose and how they're going to redistrict from the losses. People are not moving to New York, my friends. They're leaving. They're getting out of there. They're tired of the high taxes. They're tired of being told how to live and run their lives. They're tired of watching their freedoms erode. They're tired of being treated like farm animals. The same is true in New Jersey. People aren't moving there unless they're leaving New York for the taxes And after they live in Jersey, they start looking south or out to the Midwest or Texas. New York had a very high number of people die because of mistakes that they made. Same in New Jersey, same in Connecticut. They tried to make Trump look bad and ended up just killing a lot of their own people unnecessarily. Remember when all I heard out of Anthony Cuomo's mouth is, I want you to remember this now, I need 40,000 ventilators. I need 40,000 ventilators. Well, he got about 8,000 sent, and they went unused. He never needed them. I remember him going, ventilators, ventilators. I know more about ventilators than anybody should have to know. It was all politics. Say what you want, but it was all political theater. The CDC, quietly a couple of months ago, on a weekend when people would never notice on their website, pointed out that of all those that are classified as COVID deaths, 94% had other comorbidities. And we're talking things that are serious. We're talking like COPD, cancer, things that will kill a person in and of themselves. You know, when someone comes down with the flu and dies of COPD, they're generally not even counted as a flu death. Flu is considered a contributing factor, and it's COPD that becomes the number one cause of death. If somebody has suffered heart failure with a known history and dies, what is the thing that primarily took them out? The heart failure. And oftentimes the flu is marked as a secondary illness. Now, what we're learning about good old COVID-19 is that even if you had stage 4 cancer and you were on hospice, if you died testing positive or showed symptoms, your primary cause of death suddenly became COVID-19, not your cancer. And see, these were the number games that started being played by the CDC, you know, the non-political, well, they are political, CDC, started playing in April. I can remember a memo came across my desk back in, I guess it was sometime during the latter part of March. And this memo was to all counties, especially those that were coroners and health directors and anybody that's in that line. The CDC decided that they're going to stop counting flu deaths on the 4th of April of this year. In other words, even somebody with influenza that dies would no longer be counted as a flu death. And in fact, if they were showing any signs of COVID-19, which includes congestion, fever, cough, sneeze, upper respiratory, that could be assumed to be COVID-19. Assumed, notice, not tested, assumed to be COVID-19. And the numbers went up. A friend of mine that works in the nursing home business and I were talking the other day, and I said, I hear you have some more hospitalizations from COVID-19. He goes, probably not. They're probably the flu. Because in my years of working in this business, this is the time of the year we get people going to the hospital with the flu. And magically, he said, nobody's been diagnosed with the flu. Strange. Very strange. We now have an understanding of some numbers, but the media doesn't like to talk about certain numbers because politically during the presidential election, it could not help their chosen candidate, which is anybody but Trump. The vitriol hate from the media that just comes out of them is almost demonic. the way they treat people and try. Look, they talk about we need an enemies list now. Anybody that ever supported Trump, we need them on an enemies list. We need to shun them. We need to destroy them. We need to crush them. We need to kill their livelihood, make them die, make them starve, make them. This is the media, and this is what we're getting. I never thought I would see anything like this in my nation. There are a lot of people I know that will talk about the 1940s, the 1930s, the 1960s. I lived through the 60s. My grandparents were never a fan of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They believed, and if you look over history, they're probably right, a lot of his policies were not that great. And many of them are gone. But, you know, during the Second World War, you could be critical of certain policies, but people rallied together for a common cause. They never talked about putting anybody on some kind of an enemies list because you didn't like FDR. That's not how America was back in those days, even in the 1960s. A lot of people didn't vote for JFK, but they mourned his death when he was assassinated in 1963. I can remember, I was young. We had relatives visiting, a set of grandparents, my mother's parents were visiting during that time, and they were up in Long Island, and my grandfather took my brother and I for a drive to Jones Beach just to get out of the house, and he hadn't been there himself in decades when the news came on the radio. Now, he was definitely not a JFK supporter. I can tell you that right now. But he was stunned, and he had tears in his eyes. Even though he didn't agree with the man politically, he was our president. Today, between Twitter and Facebook and the media, we have stirred up a hate in this nation, the likes I've never seen before. I want to close this segment out here real quick, because I have other things to do in this program today on this Thursday, and we have a break coming up, and we're almost a little late for it. I will come back and just spend a moment explaining why this is being used and where the numbers. You're saying, but Bob, there's all these cases. I'm going to give you some insight on what a case is and what a case isn't.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to part 2 of Truth to Ponder for this Thursday, the 12th day of November. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. Before I get into what I'm sharing and the things that bother me about what we're being told, so many people just believe at face value everything they hear from any newscast. They assume it's always true, it's always right, it can't be wrong, especially if you believe in the narrative they're putting out. Those that watch CNN or NBC believe a certain narrative. That's why they watch CNN and NBC, and if they're really into some strange thinking, they go to MSNBC, which will feed whatever they want to hear. Even Fox News has an agenda, has had an agenda for a long time, and now they're changing their agenda to be more acceptable, I guess. This program is about trying to discern facts from fiction, a narrative from real truth. And in these months that have gone by, we're talking since March, the goalposts have been moved literally every couple of weeks. It goes here, it goes there, it's up over there, back over here. The narrative changes consistently. And the narrative has not necessarily followed, quote, science. We all hear that term, following the science. The science says 3 million people are going to die. Well, the science was wrong. The science says we're going to need more hospital rooms to take care of all those who are going to be dying. The science was wrong. The science says we need a mask, and we don't need a mask, and we need a mask. Now we need a mask again because it protects us. It goes on and on and on. The reason the science is changing has more to do with political pressure than trying to find a truth. If you're trying to come to let me tell you, this is something I learned way back in high school and again in college. If you are trying to prove a point with science, and you've already decided what that point is going to be, you can manipulate your studies to come up with anything you want. In other words, you can make the study appear to give you anything you want. This has been done over time, not just in this. It has been done over time. Now, before I go any farther, I want to remind you this program is Truth to Ponder. Our website is truth2ponder.com. I wish I could have gotten the name, but somebody else has had it for years. Truth2ponder.com, truth2ponder.com. And you can email me from there. Matter of fact, the direct email is bob@truth2ponder. That's truth2ponder.com. bob@truth2ponder.com. And for those that want the mailing address, I'll give it now and before the end of the program. To use U.S. mail, and I've had a number of wonderful letters, and I have so many people I got to start thanking for what they've done to help this program continue. You can reach me, Bob Bierman, that's Biermann, Truth to Ponder, 21 Berkshire Lane. That's 21 Berkshire, Berkshire, Lane number 263, Sky Valley, Georgia 30537. Once again, that's Bob Bierman, or Truth to Ponder, 21 Berkshire Lane. This is our home address, and it's number 263. That 263 is kind of important because we have a little post office here in our community. When I say little, I mean little. But that's how the mail people like to address letters. If it's not a package, to put it in a little box. So they don't have to traipse all over the hill trying to find us. And that's in Sky Valley, Georgia, zip code 30537. That's 30537. I never thought when I came to the microphone today I'd be getting on this topic. I really had other things planned. And I know for tomorrow and the weekend, I'm going to get away from politics and we're going to have more of a fun time. I do want to get away from the political chatter tomorrow and the weekend. We'll get back to it on Monday if need be. But the reason I'm talking about what I'm saying today, I saw this story that suddenly, out of nowhere, 45 years of studying disease prevention and wearing of masks and face coverings was thrown out the window today by 2 days ago, by Dr. Fauci. And he was on NBC News with Andrea Mitchell, and this is what he had to say.
Because a recent study has just come out literally within the last day or so that has examined all of the data on masks. I mean, obviously the data of if you put a mask on, you prevent the exhaling of droplets that would infect others. So it's very clear that you are protecting someone and their mask is protecting you. But recent data has now shown that, as a matter of fact, there's also the added benefit to protect you from droplets and virus that's coming your way. So it's a two-way street in that. So the benefit of masks right now, as people examine more and more the data, it's very clear that it is very helpful. And that's the reason why whenever you get the cascade of 4 or 5 things that we talk about that we need to do, even more so as we get into the cooler months, wearing of mask, keeping physical distance, avoiding crowds, doing things to the extent that you can with the weather, more outdoor than indoor, as well as washing hands. If we just did that consistently as a nation, not some doing it, others not, we will be much better off. You put that together with a vaccine, and as I use it, I say, help is on the way, and vaccine is the help, and it's on the way. If we combine that with public health measures, we will be much better off.
Now, pardon me for being a bit of a skeptic on what Dr. Fauci has said, considering his track record of being wrong the majority of the time he has ever spoken or pushed a narrative. He has been generally wrong. I mean, let's face it. He's told us so many things that are not true. It's kind of like the guy that cried wolf. I don't think I'm ready to fully believe that there is this study. He doesn't cite it. Where is it? I see people saying recent studies, but they don't give you any data to look at. Let's go back in time. Let's go to like Mayo Clinic. I think I've got some trust for them because they were writing things based on decades of research, not something we came up with today out of nowhere that defies everything we've ever known. They've been talking about face masks for ages. And they talk in terms of, can a face mask help slow the spread of the coronavirus that causes COVID-19? And they say, yes, masks combined with other preventative measures such as frequent hand washing and social distancing, well, it helps slow the spread. So why weren't face masks recommended at the beginning of this pandemic? Well, they say the experts didn't know to which extent people with COVID-19 would spread the virus before symptoms appeared. And that's still one of those unknown quantities. So assumptions are being made. That is true. Those are assumptions. They talk about what kind of mask you need. Now, most people either wear some cloth thing or some designer thing or the paper thing. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. These pretty little, somebody sews it together and they throw it on, and then they got little ear loops and people wear them and kids wear them. And if you're really cheap, you go out there and go to Walmart and buy the made in China paper mask. Think about that for a second. The virus came from China, and so do most of the face masks people are wearing. And trust me, people in China were never wearing face masks all these years for viruses. It was because their air is filthy. They are the greatest polluter in the world. People were choking on their own filthy air. Yeah, those large particles almost visible to the eye or with just a little, magnifying glass is what these masks are over in China are trying to stop. Would a N95 mask work? Well, actually, they're a respirator kind of mask. They offer protection more than a surgical mask and definitely more than cloth. It can filter out large and smaller particles. The N95 was designed to really help construction workers dealing with asbestos and stuff like that. I mean, we're learning a lot, but I'm still very skeptical when they talk about a cloth mask. The only thing it's intended to do is potentially trap droplets that are released when a wearer coughs or sneezes. Asking everyone to wear a cloth mask might help reduce the spread of the virus by people who have COVID-19. And cloth face coverings are likely to reduce the spread when they're widely used by people in, airplane settings or whatever the case may be. It may work. It may help. The problem is that we were told for months they don't do any good. Well, maybe it helps prevent you from giving it to somebody else. And now because a certain politician is talking about mandatory mask wearing, everybody needs to wear a mask. Notice that came out in the last several weeks. And now that it appears that there's a good chance that Joe Biden could be the 46th president, suddenly a new study backs up the claim. Wow, a new study says a mask will protect you. Then explain to me why 85% of the people that end up in the hospital or sick were wearing a mask. I mean, if they work so well to prevent it, why are people that are wearing a mask getting it? They faithfully wear their mask. 85%, I think 70%, they would never leave home, or they drove in their cars with it. They were still getting the virus. There is a distraction about the mask. And a lot of it, in my opinion, I've really had to dig deep, and you may disagree, and you're welcome to, and I'm just giving you my gut reaction. First, Pfizer decided to delay the information about a potential vaccine until after the election, even though they had the data well before. I'm also concerned that one of their big stockholders has sold his stock suddenly when it ramped up in price. Maybe he knows something we don't know. So while the news for those that believe in a vaccine, and I'm not necessarily one of those that are ready to jump on the bandwagon and get injected with something like that, I'm just not one of them. I live in a place right now where the case numbers are virtually non-existent and nobody's dying or going to the hospital. And I'll just stay here and ride it out. Here's some things about wearing a mask that a lot of people need to understand. You need to wash your hands before you even touch your mask, and after you take off your mask. And if it's a paper mask, let me explain something that I've learned about the paper mask that everybody's wearing, and I've got one in my car for that same purpose, so I can, if I go to a place where I absolutely have to wear one, I just toss it on and hurry and get what I got to get done and get out of there. My wife worked in a surgery suite for quite a while. And, of course, she had to wear one of those kind of masks, too. And she relates to me a little story, something you may not understand. That one day they were getting ready to operate on a patient, and they're getting started, and the doctor goes, "Man, I feel a little woozy in here. Who forgot to turn the oxygen up in the room?" See, you may not know this, but in a surgical suite, they turn the oxygen up in the room because people wearing a face mask are getting too much CO2 building up. They're getting woozy. So they increase the oxygen to offset the lack you're getting because of wearing that stupid face mask on your face. I know for me, if I'm in a store like a grocery store for more than a few minutes wearing a paper mask, I begin to get dizzy and have to hold on to my shopping cart. I'm 66 years old. Now, I'm sure I could find another mask that lets me breathe freer, but what good is it doing? If I had it or didn't have corona, would it save me from somebody else? Probably not. This nonsense that all of a sudden this mask is protecting you, it may be accumulating more virus and that they hang around for a while and you're eventually going to suck it in anyway. So I would love to see how they accumulated this data. And what is, you remember something that Dr. Fauci once said about hydroxychloroquine? I'm going to remind you. He was screaming, "It don't work. It don't work. We need a different thing. We need a vaccine. We need a vaccine. We can't deal with hydroxychloroquine. It doesn't work because there's been no double-blind or triple-blind studies." And now the same doctor that demanded and just ripped apart the president over hydroxychloroquine, which many doctors say really does work. But see, Facebook won't let you say that because, fascist book, Facebook, they have a narrative to make the new incoming president, if it is Joe Biden, look really good. And Joe Biden is going to ride in there with everybody wearing a face mask, and he's going to cure the virus in no time. Friends, we have a case-demic now, not a pandemic. I'm going to explain that in just a moment. We're not going to have too much time to get into it today. But all of a sudden, Mr. Double-Blind studies on hydroxychloroquine, or it's just, we can't use it, and he just was all over it saying, no, vaccine. That's all Dr. Fraud talked about. Where is the double-blind and triple-blind studies that you're referring to about suddenly, magically, out of nowhere, a face mask now suddenly protects you? There isn't one. Dr. Fauci, I'm calling you out for what you are, a liar. I really believe these studies were manipulated to give a desired result, and they magically appeared just the other day, just in time to make the idea of mandatory mask wearing palatable to the public. I'm calling it garbage. I'm calling it a fraud. I'm calling it a lie. The man has been wrong every step of the way. And now they're pushing this. We have these little studies. He demanded double-blind studies that would take years to complete on hydroxychloroquine. And now he's going to tell us we have all these major studies proving a point that can't be proven, when we know 85% of those that get the virus were wearing a mask. I don't get it. It's politics. I did a little bit of looking at some numbers yesterday, and I went to several different states. And you got to really just, you got to get everything on an equal ground. You can look at these graphs and charts, and it looks like scary stuff. I looked down in the area in Florida we spent a lot of time, where our primary home is. And the case numbers have been rising. So they say, so the tests say. But the hospitalizations are not. The death rate is flat or gone. In our tri-county area of like 1 million people, in the last week or so, 1 death. 1. And that's over a while. Yet the case numbers have been up, but a lot with younger people, the ones that have a 99.997 survival rate, literally. We are being told to fear the virus. And I've said this before, and it's upsetting. Christians are fearing a virus more than they fear God. People take at face value whatever the talking bubblehead on television tells them. I look for the numbers in places like Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Florida, in upstate New York, in a lot of places. And the fear rhetoric is just not holding water. Time will tell. I'm going to give my prediction, and I've made a few along the way, and so far, a lot of what I've said has come true. As it's been said by the Mayo Clinic and others, never put a mask on anybody who has breathing issues or children. Don't use a face mask as a substitute for social distancing. And if you're doing a paper mask, they got to be changed every hour or two. You can't wear the same paper mask for the next month or two like most people do. And you need to wash and sterilize the cloth one you're wearing daily. Otherwise, what good are you really doing? You actually could be creating more trouble. Bacteria, too. Bacteria is much larger than a virus, but it still gets through the face mask, just so you know. Watch the rhetoric crank out of NBC, ABC, CBS, and all the others that are in love with all the Democrat Party is going to offer, gender diversity and everything that goes with it. And watch you being put in a mask. Watch a federal mandate based on these new studies that just magically appeared. Didn't take 2 or 3 years. There's no blind or triple. You're going to be told they're studies, and don't question it. Because they know the vaccine may help. I know some people, and I'm going to be talking about, I've got issues with it, but let's assume that the vaccine is a workable thing, and you get it to enough people. You're going to develop herd immunity pretty quick. And suddenly everyone's going to think it was the new fearless leader that took office that made us wear a mask, and it all disappeared by April. Don't buy it. Don't buy it. There's an agenda out there. Trust me on that. We're just about out of time, and I know that I've said some things that may be upsetting, and I want to hear your opinion. I'm going to get some other people on, and if you have a different opinion, let me know why you think the way you do. I'm open enough to discuss it, but I'm also skeptical enough to know how things have been done in the past. So if I question something, it's because we've been lied to so many times along the way. If you want to get a hold of me, you can go to the website truth2ponder.com, truth2ponder.com. Email is Bob, just to me. This just comes only to me, bob@truth2ponder.com. Our mailing address is 21 Berkshire Lane. That's Berkshire, 21 Berkshire Lane. Add number 263. That's our little box number up here. In the city of Sky Valley, 2 words, Sky Valley, Georgia. And the zip code is 30537. 30537. Tomorrow we're going to take a break from politics and we're going to talk about radio a little bit, something different, and just to kind of, it can get so weary talking about this stuff each and every day. And we'll get back to our normal business on Monday. Until Monday, may God bless you.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth in a darkening world.